Alright, ladies and gents, I'm back today with another quality video for your viewing enjoyment. Yes, I know, y'all missed your boy. It's only been 2 weeks since I've last uploaded, so my apologies, but let's kind of just jump straight into today's topic. Currently, we are approaching the holiday season and the end of 2021, which of course means it's time for your annualized, homogenized Ubisoft release. I'm joking, of course, kind of. And no, it's not Assassin's Creed, since Valhalla is going to be sticking around for another year's worth of content. No, this year's release is a franchise that has had trouble appeasing the wants and needs of a lot of the industry's critics for a couple of years now, and that franchise is, of course, Far Cry. With the release of Far Cry 6, I've stepped back into the world of madness, insanity, and chaos once again to see if they can do any better than that piece of shit Far Cry 5 that I ultimately despised. And I'm happy to actually report that so far, being about 6 to 8 hours in, it appears that they've done just that and made a much better game than Far Cry 5. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, let's get this out of the way for any of you guys who are still on the fence about purchasing yet another checklist open world Ubisoft game. But I hate to break it to y'all, but to be quite frankly, it's just another one of those, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a better one of those, honestly. And typically with Ubisoft games, they do kind of scratch an itch for me of just pure open world fuckery. And Far Cry 6 is just that if I had to boil it down. It's a video game, and you should already know what to expect with this series in particular. Now, the reason why I think this entry is already better than the past couple of titles is that Far Cry seems to be doing what I've wanted a lot of these Ubisoft titles to do for a while now, and that's have a competent narrative and some compelling characters. The overall plot is fine for the most part, a bit predictable, but fine. The premise is you are Danny Roja, which a lot of my Ted Lasso people out there will get that reference, as a newly recruited guerrilla fighter for the Yar Rebellion, trying to take down Yar's dictator, Anton Castillo, played by the great Giancarlo Esposito. During the plot, your goal is to unite the island's freedom fighters under one banner, taking control of the island one piece at a time until it's finally time to confront Anton. With a plot this basic, they're able to make up a lot of ground with focusing on characterization. For example, I haven't seen much of Anton, but from the few cutscenes I have seen, the evil dictator trope to me actually works here, and I think I have to credit that a lot to Giancarlo Esposito and whatever writer was tasked with making Giancarlo Esposito do these awful, horrible atrocities. Like, we've seen characters like this commit horrible crimes in games before, but when you add in Giancarlo's menacing performance as this grand master maestro dictator, it kind of makes it worth watching, even though you really do kind of know already where the plot will go and how the game will end. There are some great side characters in the game as well. Juan might be my favorite so far. He is essentially this old fedora-wearing guerrilla fighter with a body full of tattoos. To me, he kind of represents how a lot of players actually play these games, meaning he is the voice of chaos a lot of the time. He's constantly telling Danny how to blow shit up, go in guns blazing, or how Danny would be so bored if he wasn't dodging bullets 24/7. Billy and the Sword are cool characters as well. They definitely veer a bit more into the eccentric, wacky side of Far Cry with kind of like sticky tropes, right? The Sword, obviously, she likes to cut people up with knives and shit like that. Overall, I think Far Cry 6 has finally figured out what sort of tone they want the series to be. In the past, they've always kind of struggled with trying to veer the line between wacky and serious. And to me, 6 is sort of this perfect mixture of like pulpy Tarantino-esque writing. There are moments of extreme seriousness along with moments of just straight up humorous, wacky, violent bullshit. But they sort of veer the line of like, yeah, you kind of know what this is. For the first time since 3, a Far Cry story, at least for me, has had my attention and will probably be the reason why I see this game through. Now let's talk about the gameplay, since gameplay's king, right, boys? So the gameplay for the most part hasn't had any real definitive changes. It's still the same chaotic gunplay and aggressive stealth we've seen in almost every entry since it was introduced in Far Cry 3, which is fun and has never really been a problem for me with the series and isn't a problem here either. I enjoy raiding an outpost with my recurve bow if I want to go in stealthy, or going in with my AK and flamethrower torching the places to fucking ashes, alright? If you're looking for a fun FPS style gameplay shooter, Far Cry has always been a great suggestion for that. My actual problems with the gameplay are more nitpicks, if anything. I do not like a lot of the new systems that they decided to implement, or I guess you could say streamline the experience. For example, like in every other Ubisoft game now, there is level capping. I don't know why, but they have to make every single one of their games into somewhat semi-RPGs. It's weird. Here in Far Cry 6, it isn't as egregious as it has been in Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but it's still a bummer to me nonetheless. Skill trees are also a thing of the past now and have been replaced by a gear system that is very similar to Assassin's Creed Valhalla's gear system. I don't like that shit, not one fucking bit, given that the gear really doesn't fucking matter aside from some minor gameplay changes. Like if you put the hazmat gear on, you'll be able to breathe better around the poison gas and shit like that, but ultimately it doesn't affect gameplay in any real sense, right? You could wear that hazmat suit for the entire game and it really wouldn't change your experience, right? The coolest new element to me in the gameplay in particular are the Supremos, which are essentially super moves for Danny. Supremos are these new weapons that are attached to the Danny's back that serve various purposes. The first one you get might be the best one, given that it shoots out a barrage of missiles at enemies nearby. It feels pretty cool to activate it and shoot a helicopter or a plane out of the sky. It's a pretty badass moment when you do that for the first time. Each Supremo has its own ability, like I said, shooting rockets. There's another one that shoots a ring of fire around Danny to burn his enemies. Electricity, and so on and so forth, adding another chaotic, great weapon to your very, very large arsenal. And speaking of your arsenal, there are quite a lot of weapons you'll be playing around with in Far Cry 6 that you either acquire through purchasing at a vendor, finding one in chests, or beating a mission. There are also golden guns that are kind of cool that all have their kind of own unique ability, right? Because now each weapon has its own attachments, mod, and skins, and in some cases their own unique ability, which has been seen in past entries before. I like this, given that it does give me some variety when choosing my loadout. Not to mention it does encourage me to try out all of the weapons I unlock just to see what they're able to do. But regardless of these changes, the core of Far Cry hasn't been changed, meaning if you like that style of FPS before, you'll most likely still love it in this entry. But now it's time to get into the more negative side of these impressions. I've been pretty positive so far, but it's finally time to talk about the actual open world in Far Cry 6, okay? Now, while I do appreciate Far Cry going back to a tropical setting yet again, and yes, Yara is beautiful in its own right, ultimately, I really don't care for the setting so far. That may change the further I get in and I see more biomes, but right now it feels very much like we've seen this before, we've done this before, and we didn't necessarily need to go back. That said, I would take this tropical Cuban setting over Far Cry 5's Montana setting any day of the week. It is definitely more interesting than Montana. But now, in terms of what you're actually doing in the open world, once again, it's a Ubisoft open world checklist game. The same shit that's been in every single Far Cry game is the same shit in this one. Meaning there are tons of outposts to take down, various things to blow up, like anti-air guns, treasures to collect, races to compete in, etc. It's not that I don't like doing these activities. It's just that, once again, there's so much of it. There's so much of the repeatable content that it does just feel so bloated at times. I think personally for me, I'm honestly just going to streamline the story and do probably all of the outposts, because honestly, there's no real reward to doing a lot of these side activities. If Ubisoft would give me something to actually strive for, besides increasing some arbitrary number or some level scale, I would do them. You would also think that given a lot of the criticisms in the past, that Ubisoft would listen and at least put more variety into the side activities, or possibly cut down the number of them. Ghost of Tsushima is a really great example of how doing a checklist style open world actually benefits from the less is more motto, whereas Ubisoft's motto is still the more the better, which shouldn't really surprise me given their history. They also somehow shoehorn in some base building system. I guess people really like that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so why not put it into Far Cry? It is a little bit jarring, given that besides the cutscenes, the bases are where they switch from first person to third person. I honestly have no real idea as to why they decided to do this, but the coolest thing about the base building that I've found so far is that when you get the first one, or at least to the first hub, it opens up this cockfighting minigame that they actually put a decent amount of work into and is pretty cute. It's like this little mini fighting game that actually surprisingly has some depth to it. But personally, I just wish that Ubisoft cared a little bit more about what you're actually doing in these big open worlds. Having us continue to do these mindless side activities works for a little bit, it works for a while, and as someone who sunk 75 fucking hours into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I can tell you they really need to stop putting in so much bloat into these games. It honestly takes away from a lot of the positives I have while experiencing their games. Or if they're going to keep bloating their games, at least make the narrative side quests worthwhile and interesting instead of so fetch questy. Overall, I'm a lot more positive on the experience than I thought I would be, especially given after Far Cry 5. And I thought after that game, since it left such a bad taste in my mouth, that I was kind of done with the series. But 6 is surprisingly refreshing in a lot of ways, but also still very familiar, which to me I think is fine as long as there is some sort of hook to keep me going. In this case, it is the main story, and I feel like for a lot of people, it's also going to be that. I don't always need every game to reinvent the wheel and give me some new revelatory experience. Far Cry 6 is comfort food at its finest, and is still a series like Assassin's Creed I find myself drawn towards. Call it, if you want to call it, curiosity or Stockholm Syndrome. Nevertheless, I'm always interested in playing Ubisoft games to see how they change their formula and to see if they make any tweaks. And to me, the tweaks that they make in Far Cry 6 make the game worthwhile. Now, we're going to close this video out. Am I going to finish this? Am I going to do a review for Far Cry 6? I probably won't. I feel like the majority of the information that I've given in this video is essentially how the game is basically set up and is probably going to continue to be set up. That's kind of the formula Ubisoft always does. If anything changes, if I find anything new or somehow my experience changes by the end of it, I'll probably make a follow-up video. But with so many games out right now, I don't think I'm going to be doing a review of this game. Currently, I'm playing Tales of Arise, and that might just be my game of the year. It's a fantastic JRPG. Guardians of the Galaxy comes out at the end of the month, so I'll probably be doing some content on that, along with some retrospectives that I've been working on for a while now, along with just any other sort of news items. But with that said, like I said, thank you for watching. Thank you for the likes or the comments that you guys have left. Thank you for the subscribes if you did. Like I said, I'll probably be releasing something next week. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be yet. If it is the video that I've been wanting to make for a while, it'll be an interesting one. It's mainly about exclusivity and sort of the oncoming IP wars that are going to happen within the console space. Or maybe I just will make one about Twitter Spaces, since Twitter Spaces have become this like fascinating sort of subsection within the gaming community. But with that said, I'm going to sign this out. This is Connor. Thank y'all for watching and stay groovy, y'all.